In the dark expanse of the solar system, beneath the shadow of Jupiter, humanity made an unexpected discovery, a discovery that would forever alter the course of history. Buried deep within the icy rings of Saturn's moons, an alien ship had lain dormant for millennia. When the sensors aboard the research station on Ganymede first picked up a strange signal, it was dismissed as an anomaly, perhaps some leftover debris, or a forgotten relic of a past mission. But when the signal grew stronger and more complex, the scientists took notice and began their investigation. A team of researchers from all over Earth gathered and began sifting through the data. The signal was unlike anything they had ever encountered, a perfect blend of technology and mystery. It beckoned them closer, drawing them into its enigma. When the first probes were sent to investigate the object, they encountered something far more advanced than any human-made technology they had ever seen. It was a warship, or what remained of one, sleek and covered in intricate markings that no human could decipher. The ship was massive, its size unimaginable, even by galactic standards. It sat half buried in the icy depths of Saturn's moon Titan, but its core pulse was still faintly alive, humming with power. It was then that the truth was revealed. This wasn't just a derelict ship, it was a blueprint for a weapon, something far more devastating than any civilization had ever wielded. Buried within the wreckage was the key to humanity's salvation, but also its destruction. The ancient alien ship was of unknown origin, its technology far beyond human comprehension, and as the first human teams boarded it, they soon realized that its design held secrets not only to great power, but also to great peril. After years of decoding fragments of data gathered from the wreckage, humanity's best minds agreed on one thing: the ship was more than a weapon. It was a key to unlocking something far greater, something hidden deep within the core of the vessel itself. It took only months before the first human engineers successfully adapted alien blueprints and began construction of the ship they would call the Aetheris. Its design was based on the ancient vessel, but with one crucial difference: it was human in nature, a fusion of alien technology and human ingenuity built in secret in a remote facility on Earth's moon. The Aetheris was a ship like no other. Its engines hummed with power that defied known physics. Its weapon systems were designed to tear through enemy fleets with ease, and yet its most extraordinary feature was hidden within its core, an energy matrix powered by human emotion. And the scientists could barely comprehend how it functioned, but they knew that it was humanity's only hope against the coming storm. The news of the ship's construction was kept a closely guarded secret, even as whispers of an impending alien invasion began to grow across the galaxy. Earth's governments were aware that their time was running out. The ancient empire known as the HFY Sci-Fi had begun its conquest of neighboring systems, and their relentless expansion was inching closer to Earth. With every passing day in the shadows, the Aetheris was being built to face the impossible. But no one knew the true extent of what the Aetheris could do. Its power was untested, its capabilities unknown. The only certainty was that the fate of humanity now rested upon the shoulders of this lone warship, a single vessel capable of changing the balance of power in the galaxy, and perhaps even the universe itself. The galaxy had always been a place of power struggles and ancient wars, but none had prepared for the arrival of the HFY, an empire older than most civilizations could fathom. Ruthless in their pursuit of domination, they were known across the stars for their ability to decimate entire species without remorse. Their fleets arrived without warning, as they had always done, sweeping through the neighboring systems like locusts, devouring everything in their path. Entire civilizations were obliterated without hesitation, and their survivors enslaved to serve the whims of the HFY lords. For centuries, the HFY had held dominion over a vast swath of space, their technology and military might outstripping every other species they encountered. The galaxy had grown accustomed to their cold and brutal methods. As they marched through the stars, conquering without mercy, their ships were immense, void-dwelling monsters, armed with weapons that could turn entire planets into ash. Their leaders were said to be nearly immortal beings with power far beyond any human understanding. It was only a matter of time before Earth would catch the attention of the HFY. The small human race had managed to crawl out of its primitive beginnings and into the interstellar stage, but compared to the empires of the galaxy, it was insignificant in the eyes of the Sci-Fi humans, were a fledgling species barely scraping by in the vast cosmos, a weak prey to be hunted or enslaved. Yet Earth had something that Sci-Fi had not anticipated, something they could not understand. In the silence of space, a vast fleet of Sci-Fi warships emerged from a tear in the fabric of space itself, their enormous forms blotting out the stars. As they entered the solar system, humanity's defenses were laughable in comparison. The best they had were a handful of ships that were no match for the oncoming tide of destruction. But it wasn't until the Sci-Fi forces entered Earth's orbit that they learned something they had not considered. Earth had a secret, a weapon capable of challenging their dominance. At first, the Sci-Fi commanders laughed at the reports of a single human warship being constructed in the shadows of their own moon. They believed it to be little more than a desperate bluff from a weak species. But as their fleets moved closer to Earth, and the Aetheris's unmistakable energy readings were detected, something shifted in the Sci-Fi ranks. They had seen ancient technologies before, but nothing like this. They had never encountered anything capable of harnessing power like the Aetheris was rumored to possess. The first few encounters with humanity were brutal. The Sci-Fi ships, effortlessly tearing through Earth's weak defenses as they made their way toward the planet's surface, cities crumbled and systems fell one by one to the unrelenting assault. The human military was decimated within days, yet still the whispers of the Aetheris continued to spread through the ranks of humanity's defenders as a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. No one knew what the Aetheris could truly do, or if it even had the power to stand against the Sci-Fi Empire's might. But Earth had no choice but to place its faith in this untested warship. The world's governments sent a fleet to the Aetheris to intercept the Sci-Fi advance and to protect the last chance humanity had at survival. And so it was that the Aetheris made its first appearance on the galactic stage. As the Sci-Fi warships moved inexorably toward Earth, the Aetheris rose from the shadows of the moon with a single purpose: to face the galaxy's most terrifying power and prove that humanity was not so easily crushed. The Aetheris emerged from the shadow of Earth's moon, its gleaming hull a sharp contrast against the cold darkness of space. The sight of the warship struck fear into the hearts of those who knew of its existence, but also sparked a flicker of hope in the souls of the human race. Aboard the bridge, Captain Elias Voss stood at the helm, his hand steady on the controls. His crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and brilliant scientists, stood poised, ready to face an enemy whose name had become a legend in the galaxy. The Sci-Fi, the ancient conquerors, were coming, and humanity's only weapon had just been unleashed. The fleet of human ships had assembled around the Aetheris, but they were no match for the Sci-Fi's might. Even the most advanced Earth technology seemed laughable in comparison. The Sci-Fi's warships were immense, hulking behemoths bristling with weapons that could obliterate entire planets. They had no regard for human life, viewing Earth as nothing more than an insignificant speck in their galactic conquest. The captain of the Aetheris knew this battle would be like none other. Earth had no allies, no other civilizations to call for aid. This was humanity's last stand. As the Sci-Fi fleet entered the outer reaches of the solar system, the Aetheris powered up its engines, its core thrumming with an energy that defied understanding. It wasn't just the ship's technology that set it apart. It was something far more profound, something that even the scientists aboard could barely comprehend. The warship had a soul, an essence drawn from the collective willpower of humanity itself. The Aetheris could not be driven by just technology alone. It required the strength of human emotion, the will to survive and fight. And with that power came an overwhelming force that no one had anticipated. The first Sci-Fi warship appeared on the sensors, a massive vessel capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single barrage. Its weapons powered up, and it began its descent toward Earth, oblivious to the threat that now stood before it. The Aetheris fired its first shot, a beam of energy so intense that it tore through the fabric of space itself. The Sci-Fi ship didn't even have time to retaliate. It was gone in an instant, reduced to nothing but a cloud of dust and debris. A stunned silence fell across the human fleet. Captain Voss didn't allow himself to be distracted. He issued a command, and the Aetheris sped forward, its sleek form darting through space with the speed of a comet. The remaining Xalthari ships recoiled, caught off guard by the sudden ferocity of humanity's response. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were about to pay the price. Another Xalthari ship closed in, this one larger and more heavily armed. It fired its weapons, sending streams of energy toward the Aetheris. But the human warship was too fast, too agile. It spun and dodged, weaving through the incoming fire as if it were dancing with the stars. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, the crew working in perfect unison. The Aetheris retaliated with another devastating energy beam, hitting the Xalthari ship in its core. The explosion was blinding, consuming the alien vessel in a burst of brilliant light. The remaining Xalthari ships hesitated. For the first time in their long history, they encountered an opponent that could match them. But the Aetheris was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of humanity's determination, its refusal to be dominated, its will to survive against all odds. As the battle continued, the crew of the Aetheris felt a surge of power and overwhelming energy that coursed through them. The ship was not just responding to their commands, it was responding to their hearts, to the collective will of humanity itself. The Xalthari commanders, now aware of the true nature of their adversary, scrambled to adjust their tactics. But it was too late. The Aetheris had shown its power, and the galaxy would never be the same. As the ship sped through space, tearing through the remnants of the Xalthari fleet, Captain Voss knew this was just the beginning. The Aetheris had been unleashed, and humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The destruction of the first two Xalthari warships had sent shockwaves through the alien fleet, but it was only the beginning. The remaining Xalthari ships regrouped and formed a defensive formation, their commanders now fully aware of the threat posed by the Aetheris. They had underestimated humanity, and now the full scale of their miscalculation was dawning on them. But as the Aetheris prepared for the next wave of battle, its crew, completely unaware of the true power lying within the ship, was discovering something extraordinary. Deep within the command center of the Aetheris, Dr. Lydia Fane, the lead scientist aboard the warship, was conducting a series of experiments to understand the ship's strange energy matrix. She had been part of the team that initially reverse-engineered the alien technology used in the ship's construction, but even she was baffled by the results. The ship's core was not simply a collection of advanced technology. It was somehow alive, a living entity powered by something far beyond any known scientific principle. As the crew continued to repel wave after wave of Xalthari assaults, Dr. Fane began to notice an unusual pattern. The ship's energy levels, instead of depleting with each attack, seemed to grow stronger with each human victory. The more the crew fought, the more intense the power within the Aetheris became. It wasn't just the ship's weapons that were advancing. There was something more at play. "What's happening to the ship?" Captain Voss asked over the comms as another barrage of fire rocked the hull. He wasn't expecting an immediate answer, but his instincts told him something had changed. The ship wasn't just responding to commands. It was adapting in ways that defied logic. Dr. Fane, her brow furrowed with concentration, spoke up after a few tense moments. "Captain, I think I've discovered something. The ship's core, it's not just powered by fuel or energy sources. It's powered by us. Specifically, it's drawing power from our emotions, from our will to survive. Every time we push ourselves further, every time we refuse to give in, the ship taps into that energy and amplifies it. It's feeding on our collective drive." A stunned silence filled the bridge as the implications of Dr. Fane's discovery sank in. The Aetheris was not just a weapon of war. It was a conduit for human emotion, a direct link to the untapped potential within every human being. The ship's true power came not from its alien technology, but from the spirit of humanity itself. The crew had unknowingly been channeling their fear, their anger, their hope, and their defiance into the ship, and with each passing moment, the ship's energy grew stronger, its weaponry more devastating. It was as if the ship itself had come to life, its heart beating in time with the hearts of those aboard it. As the next wave of stealth-ferry ships approached, Captain Voss made a decision. Prepare for a new strategy. We fight not just with technology, but with our spirit. We give everything we have and see what the Atheris can do when it's fueled by human will. The crew, knowing what this meant, steeled themselves for the next battle. As the Exaltheri closed in, their fleet larger and more menacing than ever, the Atheris surged forward, a force driven by something far beyond weaponry. The human will, united and unrelenting, channeled into the heart of the warship, igniting a power that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The Exaltheri ships unleashed their most powerful weapons, but they were no match for the Atheris's newfound power. Energy beams lanced out from the ship, not just as calculated strikes, but as eruptions of pure human determination. Each shot carried the weight of humanity's survival, the raw emotion of every man, woman, and child on Earth. The Exaltheri commanders, unable to comprehend the sudden shift in power, watched in horror as their ships were torn apart by a force they could not comprehend. The battle was no longer just a clash of ships. It was a battle of wills. The Exaltheri fought with the cold precision of a conqueror, but humanity fought with something far more potent, the unbreakable will to survive. The Atheris was a manifestation of that will, and in that moment it seemed to embody the soul of humanity itself. As the last of the Exaltheri warships fell to the might of the Atheris, the crew stood in stunned silence. They had done it. Against all odds, they had turned the tide of battle. The Atheris had revealed its true power, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a symbol of human resilience and spirit. And now, the Exaltheri knew that Earth was not a world to be easily conquered. It was a world with a fight unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle had shifted in humanity's favor, but the Exaltheri were not yet defeated. Their pride, the cornerstone of their empire, would not allow them to surrender so easily. As the final remnants of their fleet scattered into the cold void, their commanders were forced to call upon their most terrifying weapon, the one force that had maintained their dominance for millennia: the Overlord. The Overlords were the living gods of the Exaltheri, nearly immortal beings who could bend space and time to their will. Each one possessed extraordinary psychic abilities that allowed them to manipulate the minds of entire populations, crush fleets with a thought, and rend reality itself with their power. These beings were beyond mere soldiers. They were the embodiments of the Exaltheri Empire's will, and their arrival signaled the beginning of humanity's greatest test. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Atheris, his eyes narrowing as the sensors detected the arrival of the Overlord ship. It was massive, dwarfing even the largest of the Exaltheri warships, and its arrival was marked by an unnatural distortion in space, as if reality itself was bending around its presence. The Overlord ship was not just a vessel. It was a weapon, a living weapon, carrying within it a being whose power could erase entire fleets with but a thought. "I knew they'd bring it," Voss muttered, gripping the armrests of his chair. The crew on the bridge could feel the shift in the air as the psychic energy from the approaching Overlord began to seep through their minds. "Prepare yourselves. This won't be like anything we've faced before." Dr. Lydia Fane, who had been studying the Atheris's core, looked up, her face pale. "The ship's energy is responding to the presence of the Overlord," she said. I don't think it's just the ship anymore. There's something else at play here. The Atheris seems to be attuning itself to the Overlord's psychic frequency. We may be able to harness that." Voss glanced at her. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," she replied grimly. "Once the Overlord is within range, it will try to break our minds. We need to be ready." The Overlord's ship loomed closer, its psychic pressure intensifying. The crew of the Atheris could feel it now. Every thought was clouded. Every breath felt heavy, as if the weight of an entire galaxy was pressing down on them. It was a feeling of utter helplessness, the sensation of being a mere speck in the universe, crushed under the boot of an unstoppable force. But the crew did not falter. They had learned something in the heat of battle. They were not so easily broken. The Overlord's psychic influence lashed out, like tendrils of invisible energy, probing the minds of the Atheris crew, seeking weaknesses, exploiting fears. A few of the officers buckled under the assault, their faces twisting in terror as their worst nightmares were brought to life. Voss could feel the pressure himself, a coldness creeping into his chest, but he forced it back. This was not the time to falter. "Steady," Voss commanded, his voice sharp. "Fight through it. Focus on the mission." The crew, their minds now connected in a shared defiance, pushed back against the psychic assault. They began to work together, their thoughts interwoven, a collective force of will strong enough to hold off the Overlord's influence. But they needed more. They needed a breakthrough. Dr. Fane's voice rang out, full of urgency. "Captain, the Atheris, it's adapting. The ship, it's drawing power from us, from our unity. It's feeding off our resistance." Voss's eyes widened as the ship's energy reading surged. The Atheris was not just responding to their will, it was amplifying it. The collective resolve of the crew, the shared determination to protect Earth, was becoming an unstoppable force. The ship began to hum with an intensity that could be felt in every bone, every heartbeat. The psychic pressure from the Overlord, though strong, began to wane as the Atheris fought back. As the Overlord's ship moved into range, the alien being's consciousness filled the battlefield like a storm. It was an overwhelming presence, its mind vast and cold, seething with malice. For a moment, the crew of the Atheris felt as if they were drowning in its power. But then, in an explosion of energy, the ship's core pulsed with the combined will of humanity, sending a shockwave of psychic force that shattered the Overlord's grip. Captain Voss didn't hesitate. "Fire." The Atheris unleashed a massive energy beam that streaked across the void, hitting the Overlord's ship with a force that was both physical and psychic. The Overlord screamed, a sound that resonated through the fabric of space itself, as its ship was torn apart. But even as the alien entity died, it was not the end. The Exal Thuri were relentless. The Overlord's death was only the beginning of a new war, one that would see humanity facing even greater threats. But in that moment, humanity had proved something fundamental, that even against the most powerful force in the galaxy, they could not be broken. The Atheris had drawn strength not just from the ship itself, but from the hearts and minds of every human aboard it. And that was a force that even the Overlord could not overcome. With the Overlord's ship obliterated, the Xal Thuri fleet hesitated. The immense psychic presence that had commanded them had been extinguished in an instant, leaving behind only a fragmented and confused command structure. But humanity's victory was short-lived. As the remains of the Overlord's ship drifted into the dark abyss of space, the remaining Xal Thuri forces regrouped, their commanders now furious and vengeful. Captain Elias Voss stood at the bridge of the Atheris, his face grim as he watched the Xal Thuri fleet shift formations. Their retreat had been a ruse. They were preparing for an even greater assault, one that would test humanity's newfound strength and the power of the Atheris. The Xal Thuri were not a race that bowed to defeat. They would throw everything they had left at Earth, and if necessary, destroy it to reclaim their lost honor. Dr. Lydia Fane, her hands flying over the control panels, spoke up. "Captain, the Atheris is reacting again. It's drawing more power. We've been feeding it through our emotions and will, but now it's different. It's not just responding to us. It's becoming something more. The core, it's stabilizing, like it's reaching its full potential." Voss turned to her, his mind racing. "What do you mean, more?" Fane looked up, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "I don't fully understand it yet, but it's as if the ship is becoming a part of us. More than just a tool. It's an extension of human spirit. Every time we push forward, the Aetheris seems to amplify that drive, turning it into something physical, into real, tangible power. The implications of her words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The Aetheris was no longer just a ship. It was something that could channel the very essence of humanity's collective will. If the ship could harness this power fully, it might be able to face the full force of the Exaltheri. But what if this power was too much? What if it overwhelmed them? Before Voss could respond, an alarm blared, pulling him from his thoughts. The Exaltheri fleet was advancing, and this time they had unleashed their ultimate weapon. An enormous battleship, dwarfing even the Overlord's ship. This was their final gambit. A colossal warship, capable of leveling entire continents with its advanced weaponry and warp-based systems. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its weaponry alone could burn a planet's surface clean off. But the Aetheris was no longer the ship it had been. The crew could feel it as they powered up the core. The ship was no longer a machine, but something far more dangerous, far more unpredictable. It thrummed with raw, untamed energy. Humanity's collective spirit had forged it into a weapon of unparalleled potential. As the two fleets met in the emptiness of space, the Exaltheri battleship opened fire. Massive beams of energy erupted from its hull, carving through space like a storm of annihilation. The Aetheris surged forward, its shields flaring with energy as it met the first wave of fire. The crew felt the pulse, a wave of emotion, of survival. Fear mixed with defiance, coursing through them. The ship fed on it, growing stronger, its weaponry glowing with an intensity that none could comprehend. Voss's voice cut through the chaos. All hands, brace for impact. Fire everything we've got. The Aetheris retaliated with everything it had, unleashing a barrage of energy that dwarfed even the Exaltheri's strongest weapons. The ship's core surged with power, turning human emotion into raw, destructive force. The first beam ripped through the Exaltheri battleship's shield, creating a shockwave that sent ripples across the battlefield. A second shot followed, tearing through its hull. The Exaltheri ship trembled under the assault, but it fought back, unleashing a wave of energy that rocked the Aetheris to its core. Yet the Aetheris did not falter. It absorbed the blast, its power only growing stronger as the battle raged on. Humanity's will, focused into the heart of the ship, channeled through every soldier, every scientist, every survivor aboard. The Aetheris became an embodiment of everything they fought for: their families, their future, their very survival. It was no longer just a machine. It was a manifestation of the indomitable human spirit. With a final, concentrated blast, the Aetheris pierced the Exaltheri battleship's core, releasing an explosion that reverberated across the void, consuming the alien vessel in a brilliant flash of light. The remaining Exaltheri ships turned to flee, their morale shattered in the face of humanity's overwhelming power. The Aetheris had become a force of nature, unstoppable and undeniable. As the last of the Exaltheri retreated, Captain Voss allowed himself a breath. They had done it. The Aetheris had shown them the truth. Humanity had the power to change the course of history. The war was far from over, but for the first time, they stood at the threshold of victory. And now, the galaxy knew one thing for certain. Earth was no longer a world to be ignored. It was a force to be reckoned with. The Exaltheri had been repelled, momentarily, but the victory was bittersweet. As the final remnants of their fleet limped back into the deep void of space, Earth's defenders were left to pick up the pieces of a shattered world. Cities were in ruins, entire populations had been displaced, and the world's governments were strained to the breaking point. The Aetheris had proven to be humanity's greatest weapon, but the cost of the battle had been immense. Captain Elias Voss stood at the command center of the Aetheris, his face ashen, his eyes reflecting the enormity of what they had just witnessed. Despite their triumph, a growing sense of dread gnawed at him. The battle had been decisive, yes, but the Exaltheri would not forget their humiliation. They had barely scratched the surface of the Empire's true power, and Voss knew that their response would be swift and merciless. They had encountered something they had never seen before: human resilience, and that made them even more dangerous. "Captain, we've received a transmission from Earth's command." Dr. Lydia Fane called from her station, her voice tense. "They're requesting we make contact. It's urgent." Voss turned to face her. "Patch it through." A moment later, the screen flickered to life, revealing the faces of several key leaders from Earth's surviving governments. Among them was President Ariel Newman, whose stern expression mirrored the weight of the situation. "Captain Voss," she began, her voice steady but laced with concern, "I won't sugarcoat this. The damage done to Earth is immense. The XL Theory's retaliation is imminent. Our military forces are depleted, and our infrastructure is shattered. We need the Atheris. We need you and your crew to help lead humanity's next steps." Voss's gaze hardened. He could feel the weight of the entire planet's survival resting on his shoulders. "We've repelled them for now, but they'll return. The XL Theory are not a species that abandons a fight. We can't afford to be complacent. We need to prepare for their next move, whatever it is." "We agree," President Newman responded. "That's why we need your ship. The Atheris is more than a weapon. It's a symbol. We need to unify the planet, rally the nations together, and present a front that the XL Theory cannot ignore. It's time to take the fight to them." The words struck Voss like a thunderclap. It was one thing to defend Earth, but to go on the offensive, that would mean an escalation of the war to levels humanity had never dreamed of. There would be no turning back. "We've been studying the remnants of the XL Theory fleet," Dr. Fane said, joining the conversation. "There are indications that they have a central command, a fortress of sorts. It's heavily protected, but it's possible to locate it. If we can infiltrate it, we might be able to cripple their ability to launch further attacks. But it won't be easy." Voss nodded. He knew that the Atheris had become the focal point of humanity's survival. It was the only ship capable of taking on the XL Theory directly. But it wasn't just the ship's firepower that made it a weapon of hope. It was what it represented. It embodied humanity's will to fight, to survive, and to conquer even the greatest of threats. "We'll need all the help we can get," Voss said, turning to the leaders on the screen. "We've proven ourselves once, but this next phase won't be about sheer strength. It will be about strategy, unity, and the ability to outmaneuver the XL Theory. We need to gather every resource, every ally, and every capable force that we can." President Newman's face softened slightly, a look of determination in her eyes. "We'll work together. Humanity's survival depends on it." The transmission ended, leaving Voss with a heavy silence. The weight of the next steps hung in the air, palpable and pressing. He turned to his crew. "Prepare for a new mission. We're not just defending anymore. We're going to take the fight to the XL Theory." As the crew began to prepare for the next phase of the war, Voss stood alone for a moment, staring out the viewports at the stars beyond. The Atheris hummed beneath his feet, a living entity powered by the unrelenting human will. But even as the ship prepared for what lay ahead, Voss knew that this was just the beginning. The XL Theory were not a force to be underestimated, and humanity had only scratched the surface of the war that would define the future of their species. The echo of battle had begun to fade, but the war was far from over. Now Earth had to decide. Would they rise to meet the XL Theory's wrath, or would they fall, swallowed by the void? The next move would define everything, and the Atheris would be at the center of it all. The days that followed were a blur of preparations, strategies, and alliances. Humanity, united by the shared knowledge of the XL Theory threat, began to rally in ways never before imagined. The warship Atheris was not merely a symbol anymore. It had become the spark that ignited a flame of resistance that spread across the globe. Nations, divided by their past differences, set aside old grudges in the face of a common enemy. The need for survival outweighed all else. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, overseeing the last of the final adjustments. His crew worked in silence, each member feeling the weight of what was about to come. The Aetheris, now more than just a warship, was an embodiment of humanity's spirit, and with it, they would go on the offensive. The next battle would not be fought on Earth. It would be fought in the heart of Saltheri space itself. Dr. Lydia Fane approached, her face alight with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Captain, we've pinpointed the location of their central command, a station located in the heart of their home system. It's heavily fortified, surrounded by layers of defense, but it's the key to their empire. If we can infiltrate it and disable their command center, we'll cripple their ability to launch further attacks." Voss nodded, absorbing the information. "This is it then. We go straight to their heart, and we make them understand that Earth will not be their next conquest. We have to be careful," Fane warned. "The Aetheris can handle their fleets, but this station is unlike anything we've faced. Their defenses are beyond anything we've ever encountered. We'll need every advantage, every resource, and above all, the resolve to fight like never before." As the crew prepared for departure, the unified Earth forces gathered in orbit, ready to back up the Aetheris. Ships from every corner of the planet, drawn together by a shared purpose, moved into formation around the warship. It wasn't just Earth's military now. It was humanity's last united stand. The Saltheri would soon learn that humanity was not only capable of surviving their wrath, but of rising from the ashes stronger than ever before. The journey through deep space was tense. The silence of the cosmos stretched out before them, broken only by the occasional transmission from Earth's leaders, offering support and supplies. Voss stood at the helm, his gaze fixed ahead, knowing that with every passing moment, they were drawing closer to the heart of enemy territory. Then, the first warning signs came. Their sensors pinged with an intensity that could not be ignored. The Saltheri knew they were coming. It was not a matter of if, but when they would engage. The Aetheris accelerated, its energy core pulsing with the collective strength of humanity's will, and they broke through the outer defenses of Saltheri space. The battle that ensued was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Aetheris cut through the Saltheri fleet like a blade through paper, but the true test was yet to come. The command station itself, a structure so vast it seemed to consume entire star systems. It loomed ahead, a citadel of dark energy and alien technology, guarded by a defensive armada that would not give way easily. As they closed in, a sudden wave of psychic pressure slammed against the Aetheris, the likes of which the crew had never felt before. It was the Saltheri's most potent weapon, a psychic barrier created by their most powerful entities, designed to cripple any mind that dared approach. But the Aetheris was different now. The ship's connection to humanity's collective will, amplified through every officer, soldier, and scientist aboard, formed an unshakable shield of their own. "Hold firm," Voss shouted as the ship shuddered under the psychic assault. "Focus your will. Let the ship feel your resolve." The crew responded, their thoughts synchronized, their emotions a singular, unstoppable force. The ship pulsed with light and energy, breaking through the psychic defenses like a storm tearing through the night. The Aetheris surged forward, its weapons locked onto the central command station. With a single, synchronized shot, it unleashed a wave of pure energy that cut through the heart of the Saltheri citadel. The explosion was catastrophic. The heart of the Saltheri Empire, their command center, was shattered, and with it, their grip on the galaxy began to crumble. The Saltheri fleets scattered, disoriented and leaderless, their once unimaginable power reduced to nothing. The battle was won. On the bridge of the Aetheris, Captain Voss stood in awe. They had done it. Against all odds, against the overwhelming force of an ancient and ruthless empire, humanity had emerged victorious. The war was not over. There would be rebuilding, and that Saltheri would not go down quietly. But the message had been sent, loud and clear. Earth had risen, and it was not a world to be conquered. The crew of the Atheris looked out at the stars, knowing that a new era had begun. Humanity had proved that it could rise to any challenge, and that even in the darkest of times, its spirit could never be extinguished. The future of the galaxy was no longer defined by alien conquerors, but by the indomitable will of the human race.